Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast.
Women with 50 years plus of marketing
Integrity
experience.
and culture are extremely important.
You can still say, I don't know.
Stop multitasking and be present in the
Moms
moment.
have balls, big time.
Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast. We are two women with more than 50 years of marketing and advertising experience between us, and we want to talk about the struggles, the fails, and the wins that we experienced while building our careers, being a boss, juggling work and a home life, and arguably the hardest and yet most fulfilling job, being a mom. This podcast was created for marketing and advertising professionals, especially the up-and-coming marketing stars of the future. We hope these tips, tricks, and advice will help you navigate work and life and get ahead. So, Kelly, what is your definition of future-proofing?
To me, future-proofing is becoming so invaluable that you cannot be eliminated from your current job, or that your resume and your experience is going to float to the top of the pile based on your reputation in the industry, your skill set, your years and types of experience, because you have taken the extra steps to prepare yourself for the changing workforce. Not just how it is now, but also how it's going to become in the future. And technology usage and continuous learning is a key part of this. There's this quote that I love from Deepak Chopra. And his quote is, all great changes are preceded by chaos. And we are in chaos right now in a never-ending pandemic and what seems like a never-ending election cycle. And everybody knows someone who's lost their job this year, multiple people who've lost their jobs, right? And at the same time, the pandemic has really pushed technology forward in massive ways in the last 11 months and really accelerated the rise of the of the digital economy. You know, if you look at the rise of telehealth, if you look at working from home and Zoom meetings and what we're doing now and online delivery service and digital content consumption, we've all been really forced to embrace technology faster than we anticipated.
Thank goodness.
So, you know, for me, and we're going to give some personal stories in a minute, but I just wanted to kind of give my feeling based on hard numbers. And, you know, the last 11 months have eliminated my nearly 2-hour commute. And so I gained back 2 hours of my day, and I commuted 4 days a week. So I did the math. And the math on that is 8 hours a week, 32 hours a month, or 352 hours that I have gained over the last the last 11 months.
Or 332 hours that you have lost not listening to podcasts.
I mean, when you do the math, it's an extraordinary amount of time. And I hope people use that time. And I'm calling it gain time. And I've used this time for experimentation and learning. I started reading one business book a week. We've talked about that. I launched the Williams Whittle Media Club. I've read and done reviews of, I think, 44 books. I think I have 10 or 12 to go to get to 52. We launched our podcast. Even though we didn't launch it till November, we actually started on it in the summer, and we had 7 in the queue before we launched. I started writing a book on nonprofit advertising. You launched your own book. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to do all these things with an ordinary commute. And so my goal has always been to stay focused on what I do best, with the ultimate goal of working until I no longer have to introduce myself. So what is future-proofing for you?
Well, you know, I was introduced to the word future-proofing by someone that I worked with, and he uses this as kind of a prompt for his clients, just thinking about their business. You know, how do they future-proof their lines of revenue? How do they future-proof their membership within, for an association audience, and making sure that their organization is viable, over the changes of time, right? And so I think future-proofing boils down for me to fundamentally change will always happen. So people change, industries change, businesses change. If you're on the agency side, leadership changes that eventually trickles down into other changes. So I don't want to say this to keep you on the edge of the seat, of your seat, and have all this anxiety, but I believe you have to make deliberate moves to future proof. So basically to be ready for the change, to be adaptable and flexible for change. And there's no other industry, well, there probably are, but in the advertising and marketing industry, you have to be very aware of future proofing.
Well, let's start with some personal stories. Can you tell me some of your personal stories about how
Yeah.
you've future-proofed your career?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and it kind of goes back to one of the stories that bubbled to the top is like in high school. I talked about on a podcast episode that I've always wanted to be in marketing. I was very focused on this, but I also play the viola. I have since I was 9 years old,
I love that.
and I'm still a musician. And in high school, I thought perhaps I wanted to be a professional musician. I was a very serious student. So I was, thinking that I was going to go to college and make all the decisions for my life. And so I tried out at many schools. I went and auditioned to be part of the orchestra there and be a music student. And through that process, I just decided that I really did not want to practice every day, all day. And 1% of the musicians students actually get a seat in a professional orchestra. It's so cutthroat.
Yeah.
Thank God it's not that way in advertising and marketing. So what I did was I started to kind of shift my mindset of I really wanted this creative outlet that music gives me. And it made me start realizing that that really is what marketing is for me. And so in a way, that just mental shift really future proofed me for being okay with not becoming a professional musician and instead really pursuing my passion of marketing and advertising and still staying in that creative space that I love so much.
And do you still play?
I do.
How
I
often do you play? Not the 6 hours a day that you
Well,
used to.
that's funny because when I became a mom, I was like, okay, guys, I cannot play 90 events a year on top of my full-time job. And so we actually found another violist. So we kind of share the duties. And I think my quartet maybe plays like 50 or 60 events a year.
Whoa.
I probably play once or twice a month.
That's
Really
a lot
just
still.
depending. Yeah, it is, but it's nowhere near what I used to play. But
That
in
is
some ways I miss
impressive.
it. In some ways I miss it. But with the pandemic, we've been doing live stream performances, which have been so fun and actually, so much more fun than gigging, really.
Oh, wow.
I know. So what is your future proofing story?
So I have 4.
I figured you might.
Yeah, I always have multiple ones. I'm going to start with, you always talk about your personality is supposed to be formed by the time you're 87, right? And
What?
that's what they say on the research, that your personality is formed by then. And I've always so stressed about that in terms of raising my kids, making sure nothing bad happened to them before they were 7. And now they're teenagers and we have a whole new set of problems potentially. But so for me, I future-proofed my career, number one, based on being adaptable. And I was forced to be adaptable because my dad had a career where we moved many, many different times. And I was always a new kid in class. So I moved at really, really difficult times. If you think about the trajectory of your school years. So I moved in between first and second grade several times before that, but in the middle of 8th grade, middle of 8th grade, and then between my junior and senior year of high school. I went to 2 different high schools. My parents moved from Seattle to Denver. And so I was the new kid. And so I was forced to become adaptable. And I was forced to throw myself out there and meet people. And I did that through sports. We talked about this in the past because I was a runner and I did track and cross country. And that's how I was able to differentiate myself. And that's how I was able to meet friends initially. And so that made me adaptable in that after college, I was like, okay, I'm moving to LA. And then, we talked about my progression, how I ended up moving to San
Yeah.
Francisco and then again to DC. So I'm up for anything, really. I'm always the new kid, and I'm used to it, and I'm okay with that. And
not afraid of change.
yeah, not afraid. And I think that's really helped me in my career because, you on a regular basis, you have clients who say, okay, we got to pause this. We got to start this. We got to change this. And I'm always like, okay, here we go. Been through this, know what to do. So that's my first story. And the second one we've talked about in past podcasts, and that is embracing technology. And we talked about the fact that you worked at AOL and I worked at Netcom.
Yeah.
Back in the day. And so, in the dot-com boom, I purposely chose a job where I would be enmeshed in technology, to work in technology and to work on the client side in technology. I also was the vice president of a web development firm in my career. And so I even became Scrum Master certified. And so these are things that are really important for everyone to embrace technology. I think I also saw a stat that 35% of the workforce now is freelance, and that may be a future for all of us. So we all need to be embracing technology.
The gig economy is real.
Yeah. I'm going to do one more and then we'll go back and forth because I could go on all day. The second thing I did was this idea of continuous learning. And when I was a mom, I still am a mom.
Did you forget? It's a Friday. So forgetful Friday. There you go.
When I was a young mom, how about that? I was working part-time. I always kept one foot in. I never stepped out because I thought that was important. But I wanted to keep my skill sets going. And so I jumped on the blog train really early on, and I started a blog. I can't say it out loud because it has a swear word in it. It's called Om, because I love yoga, the Om, and SH*T. So it's kind of this combination of Zen and bad things happening. And I called it Mother of Three Seeking. My tagline was Mother of Three Seeking Tranquility. And so I had really silly topics that were mom related, like that. Back then it was the only exercise stuff that you could do inside was the Wii Fit. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I loved the Wii Fit.
So, and they talked about it on Twitter. So I did a blog called We Fit Twitter Moms. I talked about superhero life lessons. I just posted that on Twitter. I did one on Murphy's Law of for parents of boys. And so having this blog really actually helped me get one of my next jobs, my full-time jobs, because I ended up launching a blog for that company later. And it showed that even though the topics were silly and mom related and completely unrelated to work, it demonstrated my passion and my interest, and that, I knew how to start a blog and I knew how to write. And then, of course, we've talked about other ways to do continuous learning in terms of, our podcast here, the media club, attending conferences and webinars, women's groups, and networking. Do you have some other ones before I go on and on?
Well, I love that I use the term ABL, always be learning.
Oh, good.
That's definitely part of my mantra. If you're a person that maybe it isn't into that yet, that is definitely something to use to future proof for sure. I think kind of maybe another little second story for me is I found that I did several future proofing things that I wasn't even aware of when I left my full-time job and started on my own for 5-1s. And it wasn't that long ago, it was almost 4 years ago. And one of those is making connections. And so obviously when I graduated, college and went out into the working world, there was no LinkedIn.
Yeah.
The way you kept in touch with people really was through business cards and email. And so I guess I started collecting these things and keeping in touch with people just kind of naturally. And I didn't really intentionally do it, but it was such a key component of future proofing because, and I've talked about this too, like, even though I wasn't the leader, I would go into a meeting and meet new people. I was just the secondary, I was the assistant AE. I still acted like, okay, I need to know you in the future. And those relationships really became pivotal to me. And when I started on my own, I went back to some of those people and they ended up being a referral for so many different jobs.
That's great.
And quite frankly, sounding boards for just, hey, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? Give me feedback. And so connections are a really great way to future proof. And it's not that hard to do.
No.
Not that hard to do. I know we'll talk about this one in another episode, but also creating a portfolio.
Oh, yeah.
You and I really want to talk about, creating your own personal brand, which I think is another huge key component of future proofing your career. Because in the end, as you just said when we opened up this podcast episode, is that it's you that you will have to market when things change, whether it's, you lose your job, you want to move on from your job. It's that just the market changes so drastically that your position morphs into something brand new, So I really pushed myself out of my comfort zone, and started writing blogs. Like, just like you said, like I started writing, at the agency for the blog. I mean, I did not want to write, let me be honest, but it pushed me to explore that creative part of myself. And then I was able to use those blogs as writing samples, and to showcase my abilities. So that's another one. I'll piggyback on that one that you just said. Okay. So let's get into the nitty gritty, Kelly, because I know you have a lot of good advice, for sure, about future proofing. So tell me about, you really, like, you're so much more deep into this, even though I've kind of dabbled in it, like understanding your journey of understanding your skills and personality traits and where you work best. And how does that lead you to the insights that can then, future proof your career?
So my advice for future proofing your career starts with knowing and investing in yourself. So
I love that.
Knowledge is a power. You need to know what the basic knowledge of what your strengths and weaknesses are. And you can find them out in a variety of ways. You can ask your friends, you can ask your family. They'll be the first ones to tell you. You can ask coworkers, former bosses. You can look at your reviews, the good ones and the bad ones.
Yeah.
You may have been a part of a 360-degree review as well through coworkers and people work underneath you and next to you. LinkedIn skills and endorsements that you may have. But the first one is, you really, for your current job, you need to understand how you're being reviewed in your own job. Get a copy of your annual review template and find out what the ratings are based on, and even what the derailers are. And I kind of went through some of these old ones that I had in my huge, gigantic plastic box of work stuff. And I couldn't believe this, but I found one company, the derailers, actual derailers of how you could lose your job. And some make sense, but there's one that kind of surprised and shocked me. So one of them was lack of ethics and values. I think that's really important.
Yowzers.
That was actually written in as a derailer. Insensitivity to others. I think that's important. It needs to be written in there.
Yeah.
Betrayal of trust was another one. Now, here's the one that was the kicker that threw me off. Overly ambitious.
No.
Yeah, that was in there. So
wow.
You need to understand these things may be in there, and unless you ask, you don't know what those derailers are, right? So knowing how you're being reviewed is important. And then this is my visual aid section. So getting third-party help through skills assessment. We've all done our Myers-Briggs skills assessment. I am an ENTJ, okay? And I've done that multiple times. I skate the line between introvert and extrovert. Personally, I'm an introvert, but professionally, I have to be an extrovert. So that's important information to know because it also tells you what your occupational areas should be. So, these reports that you get, some of these you might have to pay for. And I've done these classes through like alumni resources. My good friend and I did this 20 years ago, and we were actually looking through all the results, and they're all exactly where I am today. It's funny. The interests that I had then are still today. Actually, it was from 1997. How many years ago was that? I can't count, but 23, 24 years ago, we went through some of these exercises.
And Kelly, I am an ENTJ too.
No, that's funny. Not totally surprised, I guess, now that I think about it. But we'll have to discuss that offline. I think that's interesting. The other one that I talked about in an old session that we did was aptitude testing. And I did aptitude testing through something called the Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation in DC, and they're all around the US. And I talked about this. They're not interests, they're not interest or personality tests or IQ tests, they're actually skills assessments. And so it costs like $750 or $800 depending on the market that you live in. But what they say is that people's natural abilities actually remains fairly stable throughout your lives. And so this was kind of, huge amount of stuff that I came out and we talked about. It's everything from your basic knowledge of vocabulary to math to telling the differences between various colors to your manual dexterity. All sorts of things. And that's where I found out that ideation is my number one skill. So that really helped me. The next one is gonna be interesting to a lot of people and may surprise you. This was actually recommended to me to someone who worked in the White House, the Obama White House, let me clarify. And he wanted to get out of government and work in for-profit to make some money, right? And he read What Color Is Your Parachute? Which, is like from the 80s, but they update it every year. But what he recommended out of this is something called the flower exercise. And so I did the flower exercise. I created my own version, or you could download it. And what it is, you can various steps of what you want, your values, your goals, your purposes, your transferable skills, your special knowledges, your interests, your strongest traits. The environment, something called the Holland Code. Are you enterprising? Are you social? Are you artistic? Working conditions that you want, level of responsibility and salary, geography, etc. So having this is really important. Figure out what are those things that that are mandatory for your next job. And they're different petals, I guess you would call it. And then another class I took was on communication styles. One had, are you a thinker, a doer, a friend, or an actor? And then the last one is was my favorite. I had a client have us all take an emergenetics class. I don't know if anyone heard of emergenetics, but emergenetics is another thing where you actually take this test, and this is mine. We all had to wear these badges to find out if you are a conceptual, if you're social, and analytical or structural. And I am 43% conceptual, 26% analytical, 16% social, and 15% structural. I will die in a highly structural environment. Do not put me in a structural environment. I must be in a conceptual environment. So this is information that's good for you. It's also good if you know like your coworkers or your clients. So for example, if your client is highly analytical, they want the details. If they're highly conceptual, don't give them the details. So those are my favorite things that you can do right away to assess your skills. Tell me some of yours.
Well, I have recently done two of those types of skills. One of them is through the culture index.
I don't
And
know that one.
it gives you a report about how you operate in a work environment. So for instance, some of my feedback was I'm a person who likes to initiate and finish activities in quick succession. I prefer variety in their circumstances. Hello, that's so me. And I like working under pressure.
Interesting.
It also said that I am probably a reserved person who needs time to become comfortable with others, which is, it was totally right on for me, right? And I require a work culture with a great degree of detail orientation. I could go on. It was a lot. It was a lot of feedback. But knowing that, I guess the question is, how do we transfer these into insights for ourselves where we can then future proof our careers, right? Because in this crazy pandemic world, when literally work has just stopped right out of the blue, and people have lost their jobs for no other reason other than that the economy just couldn't sustain it, right? Really probably threw a lot of people into tailspins, and also young up and coming kids or young professionals who have either just left college or are starting out in the workplace. There may not be a plethora of jobs or opportunities available. So I guess my question back at you, Kelly, is how do we take all of these really great things, and turn them into actionable things that do help us future proof?
So once you know your strengths, you need to tout them. And we've talked about self-promotion in the past. And
Yeah.
so you've got them. You need to inventory your accomplishments. You need to tout them on LinkedIn. Maybe parts of them go on your Twitter profile. This is my area of expertise. I'm a nonprofit ideator, is what I think I have on mine.
Yeah. And I think also, just to interject, I think what you're saying is also not to just do these when you've lost your job or you're looking for a job.
Oh, yeah.
But that these should be something that you regularly do. Obviously, you don't want to be the boaster, but there's a certain cadence of this that you're talking about that you need to do as a future proofer.
I'll give you an example of that, of something I'm obsessed with right now. And I think I've told you about it. I'm going to give a little shout out to marketing Twitter, #marketing Twitter.
I don't know, Kelly, you're deep. You're deep
I know.
into it.
I got deep into it, and I've been a little obsessed, and I've got to stop. But it's this amazing group of people all types of people who talk about marketing, are obsessed with marketing, and each one has a different area of expertise. And I am on there because I want to learn. And I want to know, I need to know as the leader of an advertising agency, down to the bottom level, what is a Twitter thread? What is, everything that you need to know. I always need to be learning. And so I'm learning a lot from this group, and they all tout their experience. And it's a matter of lifting each other up and what else can I learn here? And so, we're not in an environment where we can collaborate on a regular basis. So I've found that as a really great way to okay, I'm going to follow this person because they really know about UX. I'm going to follow this person because they really know about social media, and I need to get myself going. And so that one has been really important for them. And all of them are really good at knowing their strengths and touting them. And they actually call out experts in different areas. This person really knows about XYZ. And I love that. So I'm going to keep going to the next one, which is, develop your soft skills. These are things that, you don't put on a resume, but come out in an interview. Your leadership skills, your communication skills, your collaboration ability, your time management. And the next one is, be invaluable. We've talked about this as well.
Yes, go check out our other episodes.
Yeah.
Especially the one about being an account manager. We talk a lot about being invaluable there.
So, that's going the extra mile. Make your boss's job easier. Take the lead, be known as an expert. You did a great job talking about always be learning. And so There's so much out there. I mean, I also subscribe to Masterclass, and there's so many good Masterclasses out there. It's like an app that you can order through Apple TV, and they have one with Jeff Goodby and from Goodby and Silverstein, both of them. There are documentaries, Helvetica, Art and Copy, The Greatest Movie Ever Sold, Objectified. So many different docs and online classes and things that you can do, to continue to be learning. We need to learn more about AI and cyber technology and automation, things that we might not be thinking about every day now, but just as we need to think about how our iWatch is going to, handle ads and Facebook and Twitter and all that sort of stuff, we need to start, future thinking about some of those things. We also talked about embracing technology in the past, learning Canva, learning all these technologies. And you did a great job talking about growing and developing your professional network. So those are all of mine. But I think I've got a couple more points to make, but do you have any additionals before we kind of wrap everything into a nice
I also
package?
wanted to talk about like all of those skills like that you are trying to hone and learn. They're fundamental and can translate to other jobs. So I know a handful of people who have, whether it be pandemic related or not, who have left their jobs and kind of been in a holding pattern. Like, what do I really want to do? And I've been hearing a lot about how people are like, don't follow your passion. Your passion won't make you money. But
Baloney.
I think that's a bunch of doo-doo, because I think figuring out if you are a person that is looking up into the future and you really don't know what it holds, finding that intersection of passion and purpose and skills are what's going to help you kind of figure out where you want to go. And in a way that's future proofing. So I kind of wanted to talk about how like skills are fundamental and they can translate to other jobs. So here are just a couple of examples. Here's my funny one. If anyone has ever watched Emily in Paris, very cute Netflix show, totally not realistic for an ad agency, anyone who is watching, but it does kind of like in a general sense show that, if you're someone who's a social media manager, one of the ways your skills can translate is to become an influencer yourself.
Yeah.
I also worked with a couple of people who really did such a great job of translating their skills into completely new, career paths. So I worked with an account person who I just adore. He's just such a people pleaser, in a good way, loves customer service. And he was kind of growing weary of working in an ad agency, but he decided that his passion was real estate. And what a great way to translate those account manager skills to then becoming into real estate, because he had to be client facing. He had to listen to the needs of his customers to help them find their next dream home. So I want to throw that out there in case people are thinking, well, if I'm in marketing or advertising, I have to stay in this lane, but it's not untrue. Like you can totally switch lanes and still use all of the skills and all of these future proofing, tips that we're talking about. I also worked with a woman who was in media planning, and kind of on the side, she did jewelry design.
Oh, wow.
And now she's a full-time painter.
Wow.
And
I love that.
I think she uses her marketing and advertising skills to promote herself and to sell her art and to make, do commissioned paintings, which I think is really the, where you make your money as an artist.
Yeah.
And so this is someone who probably didn't think she was going to be a painter when she was a media planner working in an ad agency, but she was able to find her creative outlet and then eventually transfer her skills into becoming a painter. And I think that's kind of that's like the ultimate example of future proofing your career, is being, really being ultimately adaptable and taking those skills and also that knowledge of what you love to do, right? Like you take these skills assessment and you find out, like you were saying, like you don't want to work in a structured place. So that could be a key insight for if you ever had to move on, or if you wanted to move on to a new job or a new career or whatever that is, okay, well, note to self, don't need a place that is very structured. I don't want to be structured in that. All of those little key insights build up to, your next move. I don't know. That was a little rambly, wasn't it?
No, I think it was good. And that's why we're having this podcast, is because we can kind of riff off of each other. And, maybe we'll kind of end with, and I think I may have mentioned this before. My dad, always said, always have a plan B. And he would always ask me,
yes,
okay, if this doesn't work out, what's your plan B? And I had to know what my plan B was going to be always. Like if you didn't get into this school, or if you didn't get this job, what is your plan B? And he was, he's retired, but he was a businessman. He was really great at his job and very assertive, like I am, where I got it from. And so he was really into this. And I always had to think ahead. In fact, during my wedding, before my wedding, he said, what if the caterer doesn't show up? What's your plan B?
Oh my gosh.
And I just was like, I don't have a plan B. I don't know. So that's always been in my head. So
I love that. I love, I feel like really that's like the ultimate takeaway for this podcast is like, you yourself need to go on the journey of finding your plan B for your career. Yes. And there is no, it's like a jungle gym. Like you said in our first podcast, like it's a jungle gym because you might end up going from this to that. But that's okay. But it's up to you to figure out your plan B.
Well, tell me your plan B ideas. What would you do or could you do if advertising wasn't an option, or you got tired of it, or what are your plan Bs? I want to know.
Kelly, I don't have a plan B.
You're not prepared?
No. To be honest, I'm such a planner. And when I decided to, strike out on my own and do 5-1s, it was the first time that I had no plan. I always tell people, like, I was just at a point where I had that inner confidence that I was going to figure it out and make it happen, but I actually had no plan. And obviously now I have a huge plan. And I think you and I were talking about this, like, I don't have a plan other than working for 5-1s. Like, I always feel like within what I'm doing, I can pivot, and I can be a chameleon sometimes too. Like I can take on copywriting jobs, which I wouldn't have done several years ago, but I'm confident and I really have found my strength in that now. So yeah, fail, #fail, no plan B. What's your plan B, Kelly?
Well, I always have a plan B, as you know, because it's been ingrained in me. So I have a long list. I mean, if I didn't do what I do, in the agency side, I loved account planning. I loved copywriting, all aspects of advertising. But outside of that, at one time I wanted to be a trend spotter. You know what a trend spotter is? They started to be big in the 80s, where they would like go to Japan and go to China and find out what the cool new hip thing is in culture and kind of amplify it. So that sounds super fun. Because I'm analytical, I would love to be an investigative reporter. I would love to be work for the CIA or the FBI. I mean, I'm very analytical. I love crime documentaries and crime shows and solving those sort of things. News reporter, anything to do with writing. But production manager, being a TV producer, any of those things, a book reviewer, going into related categories, publishing, design, TV production, artistic industries like fashion, or even home design. So I'm obsessed with home design. That's like my secondary thing. I have a Pinterest board, and I am a major pinner with a variety of categories. And if you look on my Pinterest board, you can see where my areas of interest are. And it's all about—
I will be doing that right after this podcast.
And it's a little crazy. So it's, all about Zen and Shinosuri. I love anything having to do with Chinese design, Japanese design. You can see some Ikuyo Japanese prints behind me. My new acquisition is on Facebook Marketplace, this fabulous new Chase Lounge that's covered in
I haven't seen that before.
Yes, got a great deal on that on Facebook Marketplace. So if I could one day marry my passion for interior design and home design and Japanese and Chinese culture with marketing, that would kind of be like the ultimate for me someday. So I have lots of interests and lots of areas where if I lost my job tomorrow, throw me into something else and I'll make it happen. I feel with as many failures as I have had in my life, the loss of different jobs, I know that I will land on my feet. And I know that I have enough interests in areas and plan B ideas that I could do something else completely different if I wanted to. So
yeah. I mean, that sums up where I was like 3.5 years ago with no plan. I just knew that I would be able to make it happen, through all those things that we just literally talked about on this podcast, like through learning, through connections, through all the things that I had, created basically as a portfolio that I could share and tout. I was active on social media and making, my outward persona, colorful and rich. But I mean, like you, my plan B would absolutely be to pivot to something creative in some way, whether it's playing more music or, making something, I love crafts, not anything in particular, but I love making something with my hands. So.
Well, that's your assignment, to come up with a further plan B in case you need it one day. And
I'm on it.
And everyone should work on their plan B outside of their regular job and raising children and all that stuff, as if we didn't have time, right? So let's end with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a podcast review or send us a message at twomarketingmoms.com. And subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.